All right, guys, it looks like we have another two interesting options here for us to cover. And Gelda and Thor Jordan, they have released 3 new characters, somewhat as expected with the release of Chapter 10. And this will be another Leo user. So let's go into the predominant option here in Gelda. Thor Jordan will be an option you probably will get. Gelda is the evil sister of Rosalind. So that's a very interesting little tidbit. Alright guys, ignore the Gerda. That seems to be some sort of interesting translation between the Japanese client and the global release. Apparently it is Gelda for us, and the Japanese it is Gerda when translated. She starts out as a law, even though she is the evil sister. Very interesting thought behind that. She's also a Leo, given that she is part of Rosalind's family tree. That does make sense. She is an Elementor user. We don't have a ton of those that are truly viable in the meta at the moment. A lot of it is the speed and dancing classes or the attack types and warrior types. So it's interesting to look at an Elementor. She is also fire type. So they have released a considerable amount of fire. Fire went from the weakest element at the beginning to one of the strongest now, and it'll be interesting to see exactly how she fits into this. All right, let's look at her default normal attack here. Step 1, 50, so pretty low. Increase fire elemental value by 1. That is on top of what is already given. That basically makes her camphor on her auto attack. And then 2 is 80. So we basically have a fire version of camphor here on just her normal attacks. So instantly we are seeing an insane value from Gelda. Just from her attack alone, being that she's 5-star, you can't scale her quite like you could your camphor, but still nonetheless very, very powerful. We will go through her skills one by one. Let's just do default law and chaos on this one, and let's see if it makes it a little bit easier for us to break it down. So on default, her fear candle, increase all elemental values by 1 when the skill defeats an enemy. At 180 with a random of 2 hits, you can try to save it for that situation. Alright, so Fear Candle, power 180, 234, random 2 hits, increase the elemental values of 1 when this skill defeats an enemy. So this by itself isn't that strong. You can try to wait it out to the end, but given that she has a really low speed, it's going to be pretty hard to actually make this a viable part of your composition. It's probably just going to be a skill you'll use as you scale the elemental values, but in all honesty, since the auto attack gives the +1 innately, you're probably going to skip this one because you're going from a 360 power without getting a 1 elemental fire to potentially hit 360. It just no, it'll be situationally used, but overall it isn't the best here. Let's see how it changes with law. Hits random 2 as well. Increase damage based on elemental value of fire up to 15%. Seeing as the max you can get is 10 and 15, the scaling on that's pretty interesting. It's not that powerful overall once you even do apply this modifier, and it still has the same thing here. So on the law side, it still seems like a low priority skill, and on the chaos, it looks the exact same as the default. Yeah, it is the exact same as the default. So let's look at her A3 here. Curse Cage. On default, 180 single enemy. Increase your elemental value based on the target's element. Okay, so if you are using her A3, you're attacking a single enemy and they are fire, you gain a fire. If it is a water, you gain a water. If it is a earth, you gain an earth. Pretty interesting idea for a skill. It's not that bad, honestly. It being an elemental 6 with a 5 cooldown means that it's still pretty low on your skill tree a bit in terms of priorities, but overall it's not a bad thing to have in your kit. It's still better than what like Camphor has in the kit, because Camphor, you're basically just using him as an auto attack to get that extra fire or get that extra water rolling through. So this is actually very viable as an A3 on a, like if Camphor did that as well, I would still probably use that over what his A3 currently is, which is like a scaling hit based off of your water. So I like the A2 and 3 slightly better on her in comparison to Camphor, so still she's seeming like basically Camphor. Let's look at the law side of the Curse Cage here. It's the exact same. In Chaos, we are adding an attack modifier to the A3, whereas in the Law, we are adding the same attack modifier to the A2. Interesting decision making that they made there. So basically, default to Chaos, default Law, and Chaos, they all seem very similar in nature so far. So let's see how drastically the EB changes. On default, we're attacking all enemies with the power of 310, fairly strong for AoE, and decrease the target's elemental value by 1. That is actually really strong. Wow, yeah, that's super strong in an arena to potentially remove their ability to use their ultimates. Very, very strong. In the Law version, we're adding a 60% chance to inflict burn. Okay, that is pretty great, especially when you're factoring in people like Rosalind and Lycan and things of that nature. Having burn already stacked up, a lot of units already get additional buffs if they are burned, so using her EB into a burn allows your other units to potentially use their skills as well. And also, because of the nature of the Reduce Elemental 1 on the Law side so far, you could potentially run her outside of the Rainbow comp, or into a Rainbow comp, because her auto attacks allows herself to generate her own mana pool to use this Rosette Dead Burn regularly, so she could be like your initial type on your initial team that you're pushing forward, the team that's building up your mana reserve before you switch to your EB team. So this Law version of her is actually pretty viable. I think it moves her from a mono fire team composition to more of a rainbow style, or at least it's viable in more of a rainbow style. And then on the Chaos, we're still getting 315 all enemies. We're still decreasing the target's element by 1, increase weak hit damage dealt to targets by 10%. Okay, that's okay if you're doing weak hits anyways, if you're already getting an insane buff, and it's still meaning that you have to match type to type, so it's probably still best into mono fire, or with mono fire teams into mono wind teams, but overall this doesn't seem all that potent. So just off of surface value, what I can see here, it definitely seems like Gelda is viable in both Law and Chaos. I would say that her Law side takes the edge to the Chaos, but I think in the current meta, both of them are pretty strong, with her being basically the fire version of Camphor. Her being 5-star does actually mean she's probably worse off than Camphor in the end, because it's going to take a considerable amount of resources to get her EB and her Destiny bond up. So she probably, in terms of stat sticking, it's going to be below Camphor in that tier, but she has a slight additional amount of utility with things like adding burns or adding weak hit and decreasing the target's elemental value that we don't see in Camphor. But if you're running her in mono fire elements anyways, you're probably not relying on her EB. It'll probably be situational. You're probably using her primarily for her auto attack, and situationally her A2 and A3. So that's why the Law gets the edge, because you could potentially run her in with a rainbow team comp and get more out of it. Now we'll look at Thor Jordan briefly here, but honestly, with it being a 4-star, you'll get quite a bit of information off of him just by having him in the game quickly. You don't have to decide if you need to roll for him right off the bat or not. You're likely going to end up getting him over time as is. So Thorb starts as a Chaos. He is a wind element wizard with a Hydra as well, so he matches her. He matches the least when it comes to using the Hydra type, which is interesting. We finally have a new Idola type in the game. We saw it in the last campaign, and now here it is. The normal attack, we have we will be going through all of this one by one, as the page has it set out for us: default, Law, and Chaos, all of the skills here, and elemental. So that's just how we will go through it one by one. In the default here, we have Confusion Bullet, 50% power, random 2 hits, so pretty standard 10% chance to inflict confusion. That's interesting. The 10% is pretty low in all honesty, but having that on a normal attack is pretty strong. We'll see how much confusion fits into his build here in a second. Evil Eye Blazar, increase the skill cooldown of target by 2 for 140 power. Okay. That could potentially be very strong into wind elements, into taunt users, into healers as well. So this is a really good A2 actually. It is a very low power attack, but that is a very strong ability, and as you can see with an 8-turn cooldown, they recognize that as well. Evil Eye of Chaos reduces target's attack by 10% for 4 turns, random 2 hits. So potentially you're reducing of 10 people 130. His A3 is not very great. I would probably continue to just use the auto attack in that situation unless you're just looking to apply a bit more damage. And on default, his Elemental Blast hits all enemies with a 45% chance to inflict confusion. You can run weapons and soul symbols that will increase that percentage. So overall, this is a pretty strong EB. I wouldn't say it's a top tier EB, but you could definitely find utility for this in kits, and you could definitely run this in rainbow compositions, especially since it's A2. It's basically a Zola and Anna Marie counter, and you can really use it effectively into specific mono element team comps. Looking at the law side of him, we have the same normal attack, we have the exact same A2, and his A3 random hit 25% chance to inflict confusion, so you're adding a second confusion element to his base skills. And then on his, which is actually more viable, I believe, than his default. Let me take a look again. Yeah, I drastically prefer the law version of his A3 here to the default version of it. This seems far stronger. You can actually find utility for this generally in your team comps anyways. And then his law EB, we have a decent little power spike up to 300, increase the skill cooldown of target by 2. Wow, so that is very, very strong on the law side. Very, very strong. It does not reduce the EB damage, but our cooldown. So if you're running into a mono element team that's focusing like someone like a Summer Stella or a Leona, or not a Leona, Rosalind, I keep thinking she's Leona, then this is not as viable. But if you're running into like mono wins that are running a lot of duplications, or you're running into Zola Anna Marie's, this EB is very, very strong as a counter against them on the law side. And here on the chaos side, we have the exact same normal attack. It looks like the same A2. His A3 hits one additional person and reduces their attack by 10%. It has a decreased power damage. It's not that strong of an A3. I prefer the A3 of the law side. And then the elemental burst, we're back to applying the confusion again. So this isn't bad in terms of if you're going to run the chaos side of him. It's kind of a loss in that chaos is generally seeing your Jaspers and your Summer Winduses, and he definitely takes a lower priority to them. You could run him in a chaos rainbow team, but I think his primary value will be seen on the law side. His ability to control the enemy's turn meters is really valuable. Their skill cooldowns, that's very, very valuable. So between him and Gelda, there's a lot to roll for on this banner. It's very, very interesting. These weapons are a bit mute, and those soul symbols are a bit mute, but I think overall, unless you're trying to run for truly a mono fire team, I would probably use your Star Diamonds and your Gacha tickets on Least. Least seems to bring a lot more value to the table. Alright guys, this will do it for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, and keep the support coming, guys. I really appreciate y'all. Take care.